You know, as a bit of a self-proclaimed fighting game boomer, it's still a bit surreal to me that Arc System Works has become one of the most beloved and well-known developers in the genre. Growing up, I always revered ArcSys as the company whose releases were for the hardcore fighting game fans, and not something that could ever be accessible to the mainstream. And well, I was totally wrong. ArcSys' little complicated fighters are more popular than ever, despite still not being as conventionally accessible as something like Street Fighter. But it's that thought that recently had me reminiscing over the little ArcSys fighter that tried to be a simple return to form for the genre, but ended up getting lost to time. Let's explore the wonderful and charming ArcSys fighting game, Battle Fantasia. The year is 2007, and the 2D fighting game genre has hit its lowest peak in terms of mainstream popularity. The market had become oversaturated with fighters that the casual eye couldn't differentiate years before, and those who stuck around with the genre were still playing the classics or games that were geared towards niche enthusiasts. So it's no surprise that the average gamer thought fighting games were one of the many relics of a bygone arcade era, which is why when the announcement trailer for Street Fighter 4 dropped that year, it was a huge deal. The king of the genre was coming to bring fighting games back to their roots with a new modern 2.5D look, and a year later, it did just that. Street Fighter 4 essentially revived fighting games in both arcades and at home for the masses, by going back and building off the familiar Street Fighter 2 foundation with a new generation look. Which of course sounds super simple, but gamers at the time needed a reset. But Capcom wasn't the first to try this exact approach, cause 6 months before Street Fighter 4 was even announced, ArcSys had already dropped their fighting game reset in arcades. Even though ArcSys were the bona fide kings of anime games in the arcades, with the Guilty Gear XX series at the time, they were forced into pivoting their audience to new games quickly, because in 2006, ArcSys had practically lost the rights to Guilty Gear to Sega Sammy. This led the company to branch off into two different directions with their next fighters to recapture audiences. One of those directions being a brand new series that continued the bombastic spirit of Guilty Gear's fast-paced and sprite-based gameplay, and the other direction, the exact opposite of that. ArcSys didn't just want to migrate fans, they wanted new fans, and what better way to do so than with something that was new, pretty, and not as daunting to get into. This of course led to Battle Fantasia, a new fighter that was being directed by Emiko Iwasaki, whom had climbed up the very male-dominated Japanese games industry after being an artist for multiple ArcSys games and even directing the Guilty Gear Petite series. But even though she was tasked with making an easier game, development itself wouldn't be easy, because there was also a push to make this new accessible fighting game in 3D, which is an extra dimension that didn't have the best relationship with 2D fighters for a general audience. And also, Iwasaki's team didn't even have experience in 3D game development like this. Which may be the reason why Battle Fantasia ultimately went for a softer, storybook-esque aesthetic rather than the harder to translate, edgy anime designs ArcSys was known for. Without totally doing away with their anime roots, of course. Battle Fantasia was a combination of Western fantasy and JRPG tropes, so while you have pirates and death knights, you also have catgirls and teenagers with chainsaw swords. It looks simple, colorful, familiar, and for the first real HD 2.5D outing for not only ArcSys, but kind of the genre altogether, I think it's aged wonderfully, and has aged arguably better than Street Fighter 4, which is impressive because Street Fighter 4's director, Yoshinori Ono, has been cited saying that Battle Fantasia was an inspiration for Street Fighter to go full 3D for Street Fighter 4. But sadly, Battle Fantasia didn't make the splash ArcSys was expecting, because its port sold very poorly in Japan, and it was soon overshadowed in the market, not only by Street Fighter 4, but also by the other new ArcSys fighter BlazBlue, which became the ArcSys series for the next half-decade. But did it fail because the game sucked? Of course not. It was just a game that never had a real chance, because let's be real, whether it came out right before or after Street Fighter 4, Battle Fantasia was going to compete in a market that didn't care for it either way. But that doesn't mean it hasn't garnered its fans over the years. So let's finally go over the most important part of a fighting game, the gameplay. Battle Fantasia is a 5-button fighter, with light and heavy punch and kicks making up your offense, while the 5th button is the Gotchi button, which is basically a parry that can be used defensively and offensively for big punishes. Like I said before, Battle Fantasia was made to be a more accessible fighter than previous ArcSys games, so it's not a crazy air dasher with huge combos, and it doesn't even have air blocking. So it's a much more grounded experience, where you're trying to whiff punish buttons into simple confirms or going for throws. But that doesn't mean there's no sauce, because characters do have wacky moves and supers that you'd never see in a Street Fighter, along with the heat up mechanic. Heat up is a character specific special state that either enhances a character's moves or gives them new options entirely. Heat up could be as simple as giving the character a second staggered fireball, or giving a character more options after a special move. But it could also be as evil as giving the grappler armor in a one-button command grab, or giving the boxer character Ganaijin. Yeah, now we're talking. A nuance about heat up I appreciate is that you can instantly activate it and then perform an action afterwards, because it has no startup or recovery frames, making this a lot different from your average install. But for the most part, characters and their kits are pretty simple and easy to pick up, and while there is finesse and hard execution to be found if you're looking, there's an emphasis on footsies and strong frame data rather than ignorant knockdowns into loopable Oki. But who cares about all that if the characters aren't cool, right? So let's finally go over our fantasy storybook cast, starting with our Chainsaw Sword Knight Urs, who unfortunately sucks, regardless of how cool a 10-year-old would think this design is. Look, I know we're not starting off strong here, but Urs is like if they made a Shoto that just sucks, which honestly might be a good thing for a lot of you. But it's only up from here. Cause the game's other Shoto is Marco, and this little dude rules. He's got great buttons, a good fireball and DP, lots of ways to open up the opponent and juggle them, and his heat up summons a dragon that he can do mix-ups with. Shoto enthusiasts, rejoice. Next up is Cedric, who is an angry priest that I love, cause he's our Guile function who's super strong. Not only does he have good fireballs and a flash kick, but he also has Boxer's Tap from Street Fighter, in the form of a big dropkick that can come out super fast and gives big reward. His heat up also gives him combo loops, so I'm in heaven. Then we have our pretty boy Ashley, who's thankfully top tier for all the Fujoshis out there. He's super fast, has great confirms, and has a ton of ways to open up the opponent. His jump 2C alone is enough to shut down a lot of characters, which is perfect because his job is to protect Olivia, who's unfortunately not top tier like Ashley. She does have nice pokes, a cool command grab, and one of the best heat ups in the game though, where she commands a bunch of doves to attack after her, giving her some nice pressure. And then there's the cute little Watson, who's a wizard rabbit that is probably the most unorthodox character in the game. He's got weird buttons and special moves that he has to level up by hitting the opponent. And also, he's just really annoying because he can get really overwhelming super quick. His heat up gives him the ability to cast a spell that will summon giant meteors that cover the entire screen if he performs it 3 times in a round. So this dude is small and hard to hit, and he's got Blanca Balls, Athena's Phoenix Arrow, Kohaku's Flying Broom, Faust Meteors, and Bear Traps. And I can't even be mad, cause I mean look at him. And oh boy, now we got Freed. He's like Super Turbo Boxer if you traded the throws for even better dash punches. Seriously, it doesn't even feel like there's a dash to this dash punch, just an instant hitbox. And then he has Ganaijin. He's the ultimate scrub character, and I love him for it. Also, he's voiced by the Guilty Gear creator, Daisuke Ishibatari himself. So, how can you hate him? Our big grappler Dawn Valve is next, and even though he's supposed to be a dwarf, he's huge. He's got gigantic buttons, Potemkin's slide head, and a nasty command dash that could either be a big attack or a command grab. But his normal command grabs have some of the worst range I've ever seen in a fighting game. He's definitely fun though. Koyori is a rushdown cat girl waitress with a million different rekkas and the only air dash in the game. She's definitely one of the most fun characters in Battle Fantasia, but you'd be surprised to find that she's still gotta put in some work despite her crazy kit. When I first tried her in training mode, I really thought this was going to be an easy mode character, but nah, she takes some brain cells. Now we have Face, who is a weird and mysterious top tier cartoony cowboy with great frame data, easy super confirms, and a DP that can combo into itself from anywhere on the screen, called the Texas D. which is just another example of a Japanese fantasy world inexplicably mentioning Texas. But as a Texan myself, I will say this is accurate. We can combo our DPs into each other from anywhere on the screen. And then we have the incarnation of darkness himself, Deathbringer, who sadly isn't the strongest character, but he does have some big buttons that feel good when you hit them. But his strong options are just too specific and committal. His main issue is that he doesn't spin meter very well, and he can get bullied hard by the top tiers. And then finally, we have Odile and her Staff of Darkness, Doku Rod. She's cool because she's got a nice fireball, an actual dive kick, and she can jump cancel a bunch of her moves, giving her more options for pressure. Also, she's like an evil Lolita version of Olivia, so that's cool. And that's the cast, and I do really enjoy that despite how simple the game is, everyone is pretty unique, without just repeating the same exact tropes that Street Fighter II had cemented in the genre. Battle Fantasia really does feel like a cast of anime characters were designed around a classic fighting game's sensibilities, which is something that I feel like hadn't been captured again until the release of Grand Blue Fantasy Versus 13 years later. There's definite depth and optimization here, but it's also something that you can pick up for a side tournament and have fun with. Despite not becoming the next big fighter in arcades, a small but loyal fan base for Battle Fantasia still persists till this day, in both Japan and in the West, with players still hosting small tournaments at events, and those players even creating wikis and video guides to make playing Battle Fantasia as streamlined as possible. Thankfully, a revised PC version of Battle Fantasia did release on Steam in 2014, making Battle Fantasia easily accessible, but unfortunately, it's not the best port, and it of course has delayed netcode. I'm still holding out hope that this little game comes back in the future though, because every fighter deserves a chance at good netcode, and also because I feel like the fighting game landscape has evolved enough that something small and charming like this can actually be appreciated. Not every fighter has to change the landscape, and players are more willing to learn the nuances in smaller games in ways that wouldn't have happened 15 years ago. If you want to learn more about Battle Fantasia, check out Idealism J's competitive primer and the links in the description. Hope to see you being annoying with Watson soon. Thanks!